Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. I am Candon Murphy, and I'm with MG2 in Seattle, Washington, and I am a materials and sustainability specialist with the company. Today, we're going to be talking about materials and sample management, but we're also going to be talking about so much more as far as curating your library, trend forecasting, and looking ahead to the library in the future. So first, let's touch on what is a materials library and why is it important to our practice. So the library has traditionally been a space for activation, to learn about new materials, to receive samples, to connect with colleagues in the industry, and to be inspired with new ideas. Before the internet, the library was really the main place where we learned about items that we could use in our projects, and also items that might be new to us and how to detail those and bring them into the design world. So the library does continue to be a space for inspiration, education, and selections, despite the rise in online ordering. The library is really a place to learn and connect, and we want to hold on to that in the future as we, as designers, see that as incredibly beneficial to our practice and creating beautiful and unique designs. And as I mentioned before, the library is really an active role in the design process. Most of us probably use the library at multiple points in the project, where we go to be inspired by unique things or things we haven't seen before that we can start to integrate into our designs. But it also supplies actual specifications and makes it really, really instrumental to our design process. But it's true that the role of the library has shifted during the pandemic. We no longer have access to all of the things we need. Maybe some of us are still using our libraries, but many of us are continuing to work from home. And the library has gone online and also has gone more digital during this time. And we're seeing it to be actually more and more influential in the design process during the pandemic as people need to go in to maybe get materials, and we're lacking that inspiration where we used to have it. So the first trend that we're seeing is this moving to smaller spaces. So there has been a realization that we can work remotely quite effectively. So there are many firms and groups that are starting to cut down on their space. And that is proving to be a challenge looking forward. And many people are getting rid of samples, or some people are even completely cleaning out their libraries. So now it's a good time for us to really look at what the library can be in the future as we're able to potentially go back to work in the near future, and what it can actually be looking ahead. So let's touch on sample management from the office. And this is going to be looking back and also looking forward. So sample management in the office has always been a challenge because there are so many items that come in and out and need to be filed and organized and discontinued and new releases. So using the library while working remotely has been a bit of a challenge because we're not necessarily getting those new things, and things are being discontinued as we move through this pandemic. So how do we still use that and make sure that samples are safe and relevant and up to date? So thinking about sample management in quarantine is really interesting. So the need to quarantine samples has become extremely prevalent. I know from our office, we have a system where designers can check out the library individually in case they need to make selections and work from the office. And I and my right hand in the library still go in from time to time to make sure that we're updated and we have new items. We're getting deliveries to the doorstep and working through discontinued items. So implementing a quarantine process for your samples and a cleanliness samples for your library, if you are still using it, is a great way to go. And sample management from home is something that many of us are dealing with right now as we are working remotely, selecting samples, receiving samples, and reviewing them has become a challenge in managing your own personal space. So some tips on how to do that is, first of all, really keep track of what you have. And this is for sustainability purposes that I will touch on a little later in this presentation. So I recommend creating a spreadsheet with the materials that you have, the contact information, so you can keep track of those and make sure that they have a pathway at end of life. This can be a bit time consuming, but we see that doing so really helps if you have a sustainable practice and would like to keep sustainability at forefront. I often do it right at the beginning that I receive my sample, so I know where it is, who gave it to me, where it can go, and also then you have your contact information for your materials legend if that ends up being a final specification. And the other challenge is doing material reviews remotely. And this is something that we've worked through in many different ways during this time. But we have really found that sharing palettes from door-to-door handoffs is a great way to go. There's also the option of reviewing materials over video, which is sometimes effective and sometimes not, depending on what you're reviewing. We're also seeing a rise in a digital space in order to consider materials and products in kind of a charrette style. So that is really done with, for us, we use Microsoft Whiteboard, which we find to be a really effective tool that multiple designers can get into at one time. Looking ahead, we think that there's going to be a rise of people going back into the office, at least on staggered schedules. And so having a materials library and a space, an active workspace really, where we can leave those materials and then review them in kind of a staggered process could be a trend moving ahead. And it's true that materials selection is now more important than ever. We have many requests from clients that have come as a result of the pandemic. And so knowing your materials and having someone that knows them and doing the research on, for example, cleanability, as we look forward into, our clients needing the high performance and high level of human health in their products is going to be more and more prevalent as we move forward in this new world. So resource specialists like myself have become really instrumental and influential during this time. We see ourselves being leaned on more and more as our expertise is needed while designers are working remotely and are really looking to have someone with this information on hand and with their eyes on the ground and their memories of products. I know that all of my colleagues in similar roles have been extremely busy during this time, but it is helping really with the quality of material selections and the amount of time that is needed to make those. So it's true that many of you probably do not have a resource specialist. So you are going to need to become one of those yourself. And if you are doing major selections, the way to really take on the role of a materials specialist in your own design role is to begin to create your own databases of vendors and representatives, to keep an eye out for new products by maybe attending events that are virtual or meeting with vendors virtually in order to review new products, and really keeping track of things like durability and if you are considering sustainability for a project, and start to build that for yourself, because especially if you're working with a team, ultimately you will be able to share that information with your teammates, and this could be a group effort that you don't necessarily need to take on your own. If you are a leader with a firm that does not have a materials specialist, We do highly recommend getting one. We're seeing them as a major form of support and expertise during this time, and have benefited many of the firms that have them. So let's talk about decentralizing your space quickly. If you are with a group that has decided to decentralize, say you are with a small firm that has cut down on footprint, or as I mentioned before, some libraries are going away completely. This requires you to begin to take these filing and organization on your own time. So something that could benefit you is to really understand the tools that are available to you as designers, because we do have so many tools available to us. We have online databases. The vendor websites have been, we've seen a big rise in redoing vendor websites recently because they've been addressing the needs of the pandemic. And of course, you have your local representatives that can provide you with so much support. And then, of course, leaning on peer expertise. I personally work very closely with my friends from college as we lean on each other to help with selections and getting ideas for new products and new applications. And there are some wonderful joys of the internet that have really helped us. The photography and the screen resolution and your ability to receive CAD models and rendering images has really helped us as we're moving through this time. I'm sure many of you were using it before, but you have probably have seen a big rise in your need for digital tools to help you with that. And also, it's a great way to get samples if you need them quickly and need them delivered to your home in a safe way. However, there are some major downfalls to ordering off the internet. After as much of it, many of us know, you really cannot see what a material is like until you have it to touch and feel and view under multiple lights and with your own hands. This has really shown a rise in the number of samples ordered, which is very detrimental to both the sustainability of the library. And when I say sustainability of the library, I mean the ability to manage it and clean it and file it and organize it. Also, we've seen a huge rise in shipping, which that's shipping of everything during the pandemic. But the more samples you order, the more shipping that's in consideration, which if you are looking at sustainability from a carbon footprint standpoint, could be kind of going against your firm's ideals if that is something that your firm focuses on. So truly, it's more sustainable to be centralized and local. We do have so many items available to us locally if you're in a major city or urban area that you really should be doing your best to be centralized despite our working remotely and working from home. So first of all, as I mentioned, really consider your carbon footprint. Shipping comes at a cost, not only from a sustainability perspective, but also from a vendor's perspective. This kind of demand for shipping and also demand for overnighting samples will ultimately come at a cost to our clients, as vendors will need to raise their prices in order to address these items. So really be selective about what you are requesting to be overnighted. For example, see if you can plan ahead a little bit more and do a ground shipping. And there also are ways to calculate the carbon footprint. One of the major online materials suppliers is starting to do a tracking of carbon program, which if your firm has committed to the AIA 2030 challenge, will be really helpful for that reporting. And I do highly recommend that you get involved with that. But just know that more samples really means more carbon. So, and keeping your library centralized, as I mentioned before, consider a process for staggered selections and reviews of materials to keep your library both up to date and people in there here and there. But also as a way to even connect with your colleagues in a different way, even if it's, through video while someone's in the office. This is a really good way to make sure that you're keeping an active space and seeing new products and options. And use your reps as a tool. The representatives, at least in the Seattle area and for many of our urban areas, are from a design background, and they can really help you with your selections. Often I lean on representatives to help me with pulling items that could be applicable for the projects. And then because they have so many samples locally in their storage, they can get them to me even faster than if I were to order online. So utilize paint colors, Pantone colors, send them a material that you're looking to match, or maybe that inspires the project, and let them help you. That is really their role, and they know their product better than anyone. So to reiterate, really do the research and know the resources that are available to you. You really don't have to do this alone. Sometimes working remotely and alone can be extremely lonely and feel as if you have no one to lean on, but there are so many resources online as your reps, your colleagues. Just make sure to stay connected and stay up to date. As we discuss sustainability of the library, we do have a major problem, and this is not a new problem in the design world, of excess samples and what to do with them at their end of life. This is something that has been discussed throughout the design community for many years, and there has been some great ideas for coming up with pathways for these items. So first of all, as I've kind of beaten in, take only what you need and be extremely selective. Understand what your project would require and think through, colorways and textures and things when you're looking online before you start ordering piles of samples. And then your next goal is to really divert as much as possible. Once you have those samples, the challenge of what to do with them can be mitigated early on in the process if you consider it when you're ordering the samples and not necessarily when you're finished with them. So first and foremost, you want to utilize return to vendor programs, whether that's your representative picking them up and putting them back in their rotation, or you can request return shipping labels for many materials that you order, so you're able to get them back to the company. The next way to deal with samples is to work with a donation program in your area. Many of the major cities have a program called Zero Landfill Project, which has been on hold for us in Seattle for the last year. But we've seen it as a wonderful way to both engage with the community and place excess samples in good hands for upcycling and reuse. This is a program where all the major firms donate their excess and discontinued samples to a warehouse space that is open to anyone to come and pick them up. And we've seen it as an extremely valuable resource to teachers working on art programs to get them free items for their students. And then lastly, recycling. Some samples can be recycled and some cannot. And they do come with time and effort to recycle them. For example, product binders need to be broken down in order to recycle the cardboard and potentially donate the tile pieces if you're using that. So consider that as you're going through your space and cleaning things out. Is if there's no pathway, how can I recycle this? And really the goal is to divert as much as possible from the landfill. And really sometimes there is no path. And so that's when, unfortunately, they have to go into the dumpster. So being very selective, as I mentioned, is the way to go. So as we move to smaller spaces, we really see the rise for the need to curate the library. Previously, or I should say historically in the design world, the library has been quite a large space with many, many items in it that don't necessarily address all the project types of the firm or group that's working with it. So in order to curate a library, first of all, you need to understand your project types. If you are a resource specialist or if you are a designer that's working on this, you want to only consider items that are going to be applicable for the projects and really not accept anything else in. A good way to do this is to communicate to your close vendor partners what you're really needing. Say you need a certain performance or cleanability on an upholstery. This is something that you would want to communicate your vendor right away and make sure that the only items that you're getting inspired by or considering for your project are applicable. Next, we really need to understand our clients. I know many of the clients that we work with at MG2 have vendor partnerships that are established and tried and true, especially as we're doing rollout work. So really focus on those products to bring into the library and to curate those offerings for your clients. And then also understand the needs of the project. For example, we work in a lot of retail spaces and we're seeing a rise in the requests for highly cleanable surfaces that are able to be disinfected with many different types of cleaners and solvents. And so we're swiftly pivoting to bring forth the materials that we often use into those performance requirements for the requests of the client. And this is a really good way to not only help your client understand what are the options to them, but also what they can look at in projects moving forward. So how do we trend forecast curation? This is a really difficult thing to take on, but we're seeing as library spaces again get smaller and the need to activate the space, that there are some considerations that we can look at for projects moving forward and for our future clients. And really the major topic that is of concern is sustainability. I know I have many clients that are extremely concerned with sustainability and also moving forward into ethics, really looking at the companies that they're working with, not only the products that they're specifying. So transparency is king. We should be asking for transparency from everyone that we're working with if you really want to curate the library of the future. So how do we start on this journey? This curation can be quite the undertaking and can be a little bit overwhelming when you first get started. But I will give you some tips as we have worked on curating our library at MG2 for the last 2 years. So first of all, as I mentioned before, what is the project type? And the durability of the product. We do not take in products that do not meet our durability requirements and any codes that we're trying to meet, such as requirements for the jurisdiction, as in like Cal Prop 65 as an example. So we're really looking as communicating to our vendors these client requests, codes and requirements, and the needs for the project type right away before we bring any samples in. And this kind of helps to cut down on the number of samples that you're bringing in. So that's the sustainability of the library. But then it also, again, cuts down on carbon and the need to get rid of those samples at end of life. And you can also start with looking deeply into some of the companies that you're working with. Is there a specific vendor that provides a lot of transparency? Do they have major sustainability declarations? Do they have major certifications that they have that can help with any project requirements? And then also we're seeing a rise, as I mentioned, in ethics and communicating, say, community engagement programs, in order to align better with clients and their requirements for ethics, as we see that prevailing recently. So let's talk about really digging in. We just touched on kind of the general items that you're going to look at, but say you want to really curate a sustainable library, the library of the future, the library that your clients are going to be requesting in the upcoming years. So first, we need to research the sustainability of products, and we need to ask those questions of our vendors in order to make that best educated decision about what should come in and what should not. So these questions that are listed on this slide are some of the considerations of our clients. We do have clients that prefer, for example, the location that the product is manufactured. We have some clients that prefer indoor air quality and human health. So these are some ways that you can discuss with vendors what certifications they have, what the certifications they might be moving to, and to address any requirements for the project. Third-party certifications, I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these logos, but these are the items that we heavily consider when we're looking at sustainability certified products to bring into the library. So that's anywhere from chain of custody, such as the FSC, indoor air quality, such as SCS Indoor Advantage Gold or Green Guard Gold from UL. We look at the material ingredient transparency, which is a red list free. That's also frequently contained in the Living Product Challenge, and floor score for indoor air quality and transparency as well. Certified B corporations are something that we look at heavily when we have a client that is very high on the ethics scale, and that is another great certification to begin bringing into your library as well. Now, how do we integrate a sustainable library or a curated library in the selection process, especially when your clients have requirements that they are trying to hit for maybe a certified project, or maybe they just want to do better in their buildings? At MG2, I'm going to give you a snippet into how we've created our sustainable library and our sustainable selection process. And one thing that I should note immediately is that when you're looking at creating sustainability in your product selection, you cannot compare products that are different from each other. You can really only compare products that are in their same category. So the categories, because each category has its own concerns, we need to really just kind of compare and contrast. Say you're looking at an acoustic ceiling panel. You can't compare an acoustic ceiling panel with a laminate. You must compare it with other acoustic ceiling panels on the market. So at our library, we've created this green, yellow, red rating system. And how this works is we are comparing like products to like products and defining what is the highest level of sustainability in that product category versus a yellow rating definition, which brings those manufacturers that are really working on doing better, but maybe have not quite hit all of the highest levels of sustainability in that product category. And because at MG2, we do not believe in closing the door on anyone, and we really see our requests for transparency and sustainability as a form of advocacy, the red rating system is for those manufacturers that maybe haven't started on their sustainability journey yet or are actively working on getting that implemented. And what that means to us is that that is a company that we're communicating with on a regular basis. So as you can see on this slide, this is a pretty standard finish legend for a project at MG2 with our sustainability notes in it. And this is something that we do at multiple times in the project timeline in order to loop back as things get respecified and to make sure that we really are making the best selection, but also communicating to our clients, especially if they have product requests, that there might be something better on the market that they should consider either now or in the future. So you can see here the major categories of concern, which we've kind of touched on already, the indoor air quality and the material content, the end of life, the manufacturing locations, and any transparency documentation. So this is where we begin to look at and create a notes section where we suggest other products that could be better if they wanted to reach a higher level of sustainability, or where we really suggest that they respecify. So this is one way that we can communicate to our client, but another way that we can communicate to our client is a more visual way. And we've seen this as a high request for our major rollout clients that have a kit of parts or a set of standard materials that they've been using over multiple projects. As you can see on the left here, we talk about some of the things that we can look at. We don't necessarily look at all of these things for every client. But here on the right, you can see a really beautiful graphic that helps easily visually communicate to leadership or anyone that's working on these standards where they're doing good, what products they're hitting the mark on, and where they really have room to improve. And we really see this as a requested kind of document as people are reporting, especially in a corporate structure, to shareholders or stakeholders. So let's bring this into practice with a little case study. And I hope that this all resonates with you because I think it's a pretty applicable application for all of us. So the first way we start when looking at, say, in this example, a back wall fixture, is we start to break down every item that's utilized in that fixture. So you take into account all assemblies. So we look at substrates and fasteners and adhesives and start to pick apart these things one by one and begin to see where you can maybe do better. So here's an example of a really standard specification. You have an MDF, you have an HPL, and you have a contact adhesive. This should be really familiar to all of you as a standard assembly. And this is going to be an example of a first round specification, really common items in our world. So then we begin to chart that out. So the HPL here, for example, these are 3 different companies. These HPLs represent 3 different items that will have the same end visual effect. And since the only visual effect that we'd be looking at in this application is the color of the HPL, or that would, in this example, the wood look, we can begin to break this down into what certifications they have. We look at percentage of recycled content, and we look at any transparency documentation they have. The same is with the adhesive and the MDF. We're going to kind of compare and contrast all these things in a visual way. And as you can see from the highlighted green column here, that is the best specification when we're considering sustainability. You can do this for many different types of projects, even if you aren't considering sustainability. Great way to just look at the items that you're specifying is to make a chart and start to break it down. So integrating this into your own practice is often the challenge. When you're first taking this journey, identifying how you can really bring it in and utilize it is the hardest step, I would say. So first of all, know your databases. There are many public databases that can help you break this down. I highly recommend Mindful Materials, and the UL Spot databases are really great to easily access many, many materials and to understand their transparency. There's also great education through Building Green and Healthy Materials Lab if you would like to learn more about what a sustainable product really is and how to select that. And if you really want to switch into a sustainable process, you need to walk the talk. You need to build those relationships with suppliers and vendors that focus on sustainability and make transparency a priority. Also, communicating your sustainability stance and asking those questions of vendors is a form of advocacy. And as we know, our industry really has a supply meets demand model. If you are asking for these things, the vendors will create it. Even if you have a small project, they want to make their products align with what you need. And as I said in the last slide, know the database is available to you and the education resources, so you can really begin to learn how these products are made and what they're good for and how to look at them in a deeper way. And your clients don't need to set all of your goals. You can create personal goals within your own projects if this is a journey that you'd like to take, and bring those forth in small ways, and maybe make a goal to have, I'm going to specify 3 major products that are really sustainable and provide a high quality of human health. So let's look ahead to the library of the future. I've touched on a few of these items before in this presentation, but note that these are crowdsourced from other librarians and some of my colleagues in the industry that focus on materials. So these are just a few ideas of what we see moving forward. So as we touched on before, with smaller footprints and staggered schedules, we're seeing the library as less storage and more of an active space. If you are in a space where the library is just, say, a closet or like a little nook, think about how in the future you might be able to transform that into an inspiring charrette area, a place with tables where you can lay out materials and have these reviews and kind of meet and discuss these things in a really active space. And we do see curation as a major trend moving forward, especially as more and more clients request to create buildings with sustainable certifications and have requirements that may be things that we're not looking at right now. So moving into a more curated space is going to benefit both you and your clients and going to make it faster and easier to select products. Another thing that we see moving forward is an increase in in-office displays and vignettes. We see that it could be a while before we're able to get those traditional tabletop presentations or the reps into the office to show their new products. So one of the ideas that we've had is to utilize some of the additional square footage that comes from us maybe working on staggered schedules or working on opposite days in order to be able to continue to see the new and unique and inspiring items that we so lean on as we're working through our designs. We could also see it as being a very comforting space. If you're doing a vignette with maybe some lounge furniture and some textiles, could be a good place to retreat to and feel like you've stepped into even maybe one of our design shows that we might not be able to go to for a while. And moving the library into a more digital space, we do have those third-party databases that are really helpful to you, but I do really recommend that you consider creating an internal database for your firm or group, or for yourself if you work alone. It's going to really help you to do so, and there are really easy ways to do it in either a spreadsheet or in, say, you have an Outlook contact list. You can create notes so it's easily searchable. You can make notes of any sustainability certifications that one might has, so you're able to find that quickly. We personally use Smartsheet, which I find to be extremely helpful due to the ability to attach files to the lines. That's been great for us as we have the need for EPDs or HPDs for our projects. And thinking about new and unique ways to collaborate and review. This is going to be a challenge for all of us as it continues to be unsafe for us to be really close together. And I think there's a lot of ideas available to here or to this. The Digital collaboration tools, I really think there's just going to be more and more that come to the market, and think about ways that you can integrate those into your design process. And also think about doing digital charrettes. This is a really good way to start getting ideas and materials all together with just links or photos on a whiteboard, and talk to each other. We really need that engagement in order to continue to do our job in a good way. Also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with third-party libraries, but we are seeing them rise in a couple of the major urban areas, where it is a library that exists in its own, where anyone can get a subscription service to it, and it offers all of the same items that a standard traditional library would have, such as vendor presentation, CUs, and the ability to connect with peers. We do foresee these coming up, especially as some of the firms are moving to smaller spaces and potentially getting rid of their libraries. And traditionally, the representative relationship has been a major one for designers, which personally I've watched kind of fall a little bit throughout the last few years. And I really recommend increasing those relationships and getting to know those representatives more. I believe that the representatives are crucial to our industry in helping us as designers do a very good job. This is the perfect time to connect with them and start to build those personal relationships that will be beneficial to you moving forward. And as I mentioned, there is a push for transparency for both sustainability and ethics. We're going to see more and more selective use of vendors and materials. We've seen this trend in a huge way already in the retail environment world. As retailers and manufacturers start to respond to the demand of the younger generation for open transparency about the manufacturing of their products and the materials that their products are made out of, we will only see more and more demand for the spaces to align with those ideals. And we are already seeing this in especially some of the major tech companies that are advertising to potential employees the health of their interior spaces as a benefit to them and their employment there. So I hope this gave you some great ideas and inspires you to think about your library in a different way. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to your questions and comments.